Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Wasteland Talks. And this is the second episode, and my first with a guest. I have my pal Vinnie here from way back in Rider days at Alternative Films Club, and now we're in the movie club together. So you've probably seen him on the Development Hell podcast. But thank you for joining me, Vinnie.
Thank you for having me.
So this is Vinnie's question that he asked, as Wasteland Talks is going to be a weekly show where I just take a prompt, a question, some kind of topic, and, discuss it. So not reviewing a particular film or, well, technically the first episode, somebody wanted my spoiler thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home. So I basically just for like 18 minutes talked about like, oh my God, this thing happened and this thing happened. Because couldn't really freely do that during my regular review of it because, spoilers. But Vinny's question is about remakes, which I think is always an interesting conversation because I think most people hate them. It's just like, why are you remaking this? Make some new things. But Vinny, when do you think are good times to actually remake a movie?
I think a good time to remake a movie is when you can take the same general story of the original, but present it in like a whole new context. So sort of like what Bradley Cooper did with the Star Is Born. Like you have the you have the first remake. You have like the first remake from the 50s. Like the only other one I saw was the one from the 50s with Judy Garland. So I'll use that one as my example. Like you have that one dealing with an actor, like an up and coming actress and an established actor. She's on her way up, he's on his way down. This takes place in the film industry, whereas with Bradley Cooper's remake from 2018, he uses the modern music industry and everything that goes into that. He meets Lady Gaga's character. He helps her become famous. She eventually rises into stardom. He gets deeper and deeper into his demons and really can't hold on to his career. And like that was his first movie as a director, and he knocked it out of the park. And it really is an example of a remake done right.
Well, and that's an interesting example too, because there's literally three remakes of the same story. And it's interesting because I know the first one, the original, is an acting story.
Oh,
and
it is?
then
Okay.
They remade it as an acting story. But then the 70s one with Chris Christopherson and Barbara Streisand is a music situation. And it is interesting because, 70s music industry, 2000 teens music industry is a very different thing. And like, I love the Bradley Cooper version. Jess does not. That's one of the films where it's just like, I remember showing it to her and she hated it. But it's interesting because like slowly Lady Gaga kind of becomes Lady Gaga. Because, she starts singing like country music with Bradley Cooper and then bam, pop music. And that is an interesting thing, being able to do that context. And something I appreciated about that film too is they made Bradley Cooper's character more empathetic too. And because I think I guess you can speak to the 50s one, but from what I understood, that character was never like very likable in terms of like, he doesn't have those same kind of like deep-seated traumas that they navigate through in the newest version of it. And I think that's an interesting thing too, is like, if you can add depth to characters when you remake a film, I think that's important because you could see that character from a different perspective. Because what was that character like in the 50s version?
You know what? It was, I saw it a while back on Turner Classic Movies. I don't quite remember the finer details of it, but you are right that I mean I don't really remember his character. his character, who
Was it James Mason?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't James Mason. You know what? I thought I wouldn't blank on the character's name, but I am, or the actor's name. Let me. Oh, you're right.
Aha.
It was James Mason. Yeah, you know, I really, I mean, I do remember feeling bad for him, but compared to Bradley Cooper's character in his remake, I did find myself I did find myself like being attached more to his character than what James Mason did with his character in George Cukor's version
Yeah,
in the 50s.
I do. And like, what the 3 points that I was going to make about remakes, this one wasn't specifically one of them. The idea of like being able to put it in more like a different context specifically, and which is interesting because what's our next movie club film is going to be Throne of Blood. Would you take Macbeth and throw it into like feudal Japan with samurais and stuff like that? It's a very different situation, but it's the same basic story. And I feel like probably a lot of filmmakers have done that with different, like especially like Shakespeare, because what is it? It's
Yeah. The Lion King was Hamlet.
yeah, which you know what's funny? I remember hearing somebody like they should make a live action Lion King but with humans, and I'm like, Hamlet? And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, but that's very true because like Lion King is based off of Hamlet. It has that basic story structure. And I think that's an interesting thing if you can do that with a remake, because like they've been doing that with Shakespeare stories like infinitely. West Side Story is Romeo and Juliet, but it's
And
a
then
musical.
and then and then 10 Things I Hate About You was Much Ado About Nothing, right?
I know it is based off of one, not positive which
Hold
one,
on.
but that I know
I
that one is because like I know there's one that's based off of Taming of the Shrew. Is it that one?
uh let me look this up. 10 things.
Yeah,
You're you're right. Taming of the Shrew.
yeah.
And then what? And then you had She's the Man from like 15 years ago. I think that was based on 12. That was based on 12th Night.
Or something like, yeah, and that's the thing. It's like I can appreciate that kind of stuff because if you could take like the basic idea and premise of a story and put it in a different context where it's not like doing the same exact thing,
Mhm.
because there's very few situations where you literally make the same exact movie again where it really works well. And like the three ideas that I had in my head, the most important one, I think, to me is finding a film that has a great idea, a great concept, but it just wasn't executed as well. And maybe it was the direction, maybe it was the actors, maybe were miscast, or even where it's like you have this great idea, but the actual narrative that you focus on didn't maximize the idea. Because, like, you know, there's a lot of films that like have this really cool concept around it, but then they just wrapped it around some like by the numbers romance, and then you're like, but why? And you just completely, I don't know why this is example popped in my head, but like Super Intelligence that came out in 2020, it was an HBO Max film, I think, with Melissa McCarthy. James Corden wound up voicing like the supercomputer and stuff like that. And the whole film was going to be, felt like it was going to be a commentary on technology and stuff like that. And then it just turned into a love story between Melissa McCarthy and Bobby Cannavale. And I'm just like, but you have all these other things that you could have been focusing on. So like I feel like that's a big example of when, okay, you had this concept, didn't quite work, but and like this kind of bleeds into another one is the idea of something like maybe it didn't have the right budget and there was a lot of limitations, and it's like, okay, this is really cool, but I would like to see it done with a bigger budget more resources there, kind of thing. And that kind of bleeds into more technology. But what were you going to say, Benny?
No, I was gonna say a good example of that point is David Cronenberg's The Fly.
Yes. And another one also from the 80s is John Carpenter's Thing. And I feel like, because like I've seen clips of The Fly. I've never watched like the original Fly, but you see like the picture and it's literally like a fly head on a dude's face.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
And then you watch The Fly from Cronenberg and you're just like grotesque. Like what happens to Jeff Goldblum in that, and I love The Fly. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean those makeup effects are second to none.
Yeah, and it's funny because the last time I watched it, Alex had never seen it, and he was over with Matt and myself, and we're like, "Oh, we're gonna watch The Fly," and Alex was in between us, and Matt and I kept like
looking
over at each other, like, "How's he gonna react to this?" The birthing scene. That was definitely the one where we were just like eyes like that monkey meme, like the side-eye glancing monkey at each other. That was basically Matt and myself, like, oh my God, how's Alex going to react to this? But that's a perfect example of a remake. And I think sci-fi can really benefit that. And I love The Thing because like The Thing from Another Planet, from what I see of clips, is like, he's just like a dude, like a big monster kind of thing. And then look what John Carpenter does with The Thing. And
in terms of sci-fi, with invasion, like with something like invasion of the body snatchers. Now like I've only seen the 50s version, and I know that one is like a metaphor for McCarthyism, because that was a big thing at that time. I've never seen the 70s version, and if you've seen it, can you tell me what it focuses on for that version?
I think it's actually an interesting thing that you brought that up after The Thing and The Fly, because The Thing and The Fly both turn into body horror, right? Mm-hmm. There's a bit of that in the 70s invasion of the body snatchers, because like you see like the grotesque like pods and stuff like that at certain points. And I think that's kind of what they add a bit into, because I think I have both the 50s and the 70s version. The 51's just a sprint. That's like what, an hour and 20 minutes of just a fast-paced sprint of like psychological, and it's just like people chasing after people. There isn't crazy special effects and stuff like that. It relies upon that paranoia. I think the 70s one still has the paranoia there and still is channeling that kind of like some kind of like other is here, but it does use that like budding 70s and the 80s like practical effects to start trying to incorporate some body horror. And then, you know, also the which
creepy Donald Sutherland.
Oh my God. That's one of my favorite final shots at any movie, because like that just comes out of nowhere and is so unnerving. But I think it's that kind of thing, because my second point was like technology. If you can update the technology of something, and it can go wrong, because like, you know, the prequel, The Thing, I think relies too much on like CGI and stuff like that, instead of what really made, because yes, you do have all the practical effects and the body horror in the 80s, The Thing. It's really the paranoia that gets you though. Mm-hmm. The blood test scene is so fantastic. Tense. So like Carpenter is able to use the paranoia and the practical effects together. This might be sacrilege, but so like obviously like I've done some script writing and stuff like that, and like you could dream of making movies and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. One film that I always dreamed of remaking is Metropolis.
I've never seen it. I've heard of it, but I've just never seen it.
because like and I think one of the big issues too is that a lot of the film's missing. There's like chunks of it missing because the film was destroyed. And I think that's a challenge of something from like the 20s. But I think it would be so cool to see that world brought to life with like today's effects and stuff like that.
Yeah, it could definitely be another. It could be like a new example of like what Peter Jackson did with King Kong.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that, and like it's not as big of a gap, but like Dune, if
Yes.
they can Dune Metropolis, like if somebody came out tomorrow and announced Denis Villeneuve's making a remake of Metropolis, I think I would like fall on the floor in happiness. Cause like I want to see that kind of scale brought to that story. And that's something that could be really interesting. And obviously you can overdo it with special effects and stuff like that. And I think a lot of films are relying too heavily on, well, we could green screen everything.
Mhm.
And then it just looks fake all the time. And that's one of my biggest issue with Marvel movies. And Spider-Man No Way Home, there's 100% shots where I'm just like, this is literally just Willem Dafoe in front of a giant green screen and everything's CGI'd over him.
Well, it's funny you say that because like earlier today, I saw on my Twitter feed like someone posted a side by side of like of like a shot of the making of Dune and and like that same shot but with the visual effects brought in, and you could see like how like you can see like how much of that stuff was actually in camera, and then
Yeah.
they paired it along with a still from a Black Widow, and then a picture of that scene, and it's like all blue screen.
And like I love Mad Max Fury Road. And like
Oh, yep.
it's like not a remake, but the thing with Mad Max is like you can make it without continuity. It doesn't really matter
Mhm.
because they're a bunch of legends. So more or less, it's kind of a remake, reboot, whatever you want to call it. I feel like it's basically what George Miller would have made if he had this much money and when he made the Road Warrior, because it basically just feels like the Road Warrior on roids. But like there's a lot of practical in-camera effects and stunts in that film,
Mhm.
and there is a decent amount of CGI in it, but they're able to bring it to life that way. So I think, like I mentioned, the being able to update, like taking a cool concept that maybe wasn't done the best, I think that's worthwhile. Which, but like, I know why Disney's remaking all their animated films because they can make a shit ton of money and
Yep.
just keep printing money. But why remake The Lion King? It was perfect just the way it was.
It
But the
was.
thing is, they made $1.6 billion, so they won. So
Yep.
we all have to see it anyway. And I'm gonna get to another point about some of those films, but like Jungle Book to me is the perfect example of like I rewatched the original one and it's kind of just like a meandering hour and 15 minutes of like a couple of good songs and then some like there's other
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah. I will. I will say, even though I haven't been a fan of the Disney live action remakes, I'll admit that the Jungle Book was like that was a good one.
I think like that's honestly my favorite at this point because I felt like it took a film that wasn't almost perfect and expanded on it.
Mhm.
They're just making like, let's make Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King. But I'm going to use this as a segue into my last point, which is I feel like if you can update a film in a meaningful way, because maybe some of the things originally about it just are very outdated or problematic at this point in time. Because like they made some changes to Beauty and the Beast. Like they made the Beast, like the prince, like an adult. Because like, yeah, the Grimm's fairy tales were pretty dark, but like Witch turning like a 9-year-old into a monster, kind of mean for being a little brat. But like it made a lot of sense. Like he's an adult in the new one, and like in Aladdin, they gave Jasmine a lot more agency and made her character a lot more interesting. And I can appreciate stuff like that. Did you need to remake Aladdin though? Probably not. But here's the thing though, West Side Story. I remember when they announced Steven Spielberg's remaking West Side Story, I'm like, but why? It's a great film. And I think representation goes a long way. Because like if you watch the original West Side Story, you have a bunch of people in brownface.
Yeah.
And it's like they update that and have representation. And I think I love the new West Side Story.
I did.
So much.
I did too. It was one of my top 10 of the year.
Yeah, me too. And it surprised me what he did with it. And I think he updated a lot of the right things. And like having Rita Moreno in it was so much more interesting. And that added a whole other layer. And I think if a film could do stuff like that and can update things, add more depth to characters, like I feel like there's probably a lot of films where you can make a lot of female characters more interesting because, you know, it's just how films were made.
Yeah.
And I think if you can remake something and update something, like maybe they'll make Breakfast at Tiffany's at some point and not have Mickey Rooney playing an Asian man. Or like, I don't know, like.
But I feel like, well, I was gonna say like you know that's such an iconic role for Audrey Hepburn. So like how can you remake it? But you know what? We just talked about a West Side Story remake. So and we saw how well it worked out. So I guess you know like I guess if you get the right team behind a remake, you really can make something good.
Well, and that's the thing too. Like if you have Steven Spielberg doing something, probably have a pretty good chance of making something good. And that's not guaranteed, obviously. And like some of the things that he's made in the past, like wasn't the hugest fan of Ready Player One, which that
I thought it was fun. It was like I thought it was enjoyable. I mean, it wasn't great, but I found it to be enjoyable.
Me too. This is me being a victim of my own expectations because my God, I love that book.
It's a good book. The second one, not so much.
Yeah, I don't think I got a chance to read it yet, but a small thing for me, small tangent. The second that they cut all references to the band Rush out of it made me very upset in the movie.
Which is weird because I remember this. I remember Tom Sawyer like being a big part of the first trailer for it.
Yeah. And that was an one because like they use it in the trailer and stuff like that, but that's just nitpicking. That's just all me. That's my problem, not the movie's problem. But in general, I think obviously, and I think West Side Story is a big example of like you can do remakes right. As long as you're going in with good material, with a good filmmaker, you can make something happen. And I think your example at the beginning of A Star is Born, why do they keep remaking this story? It's a timeless story, and it seems that the right talent keep getting involved in making something good. And you could just keep remaking it. But Vinny, do you have any other thoughts that you wanted to share about making remakes?
You know what? Pretty much. I mean, I know I said it like for A Star is Born, but you know, like if you can, you know, if you think you can add something, if you think you can retell a story while adding something memorable to it, you know, go ahead, let your creativity flourish. Like we saw what Zack Snyder did with his Dawn of the Dead remake. Like he made a zombie. He took that same story, but in some respects it was actually scarier. It was actually scarier because the zombies could actually like run and not walk.
Yeah, running zombies can make things a lot scarier.
Yeah, I mean, I know. 28 Days Later. I know 28 Days Later did it like a few months before Dawn of the Dead, but still that didn't make running zombies any less scary.
I still remember, like, is it the 40-Year-Old Virgin where they have Dawn of the Dead playing in the store, and at one point it's the beginning of the movie, and like the little girl's like, "Rah!" and it scares the crap out of them.
I think
Yeah.
so.
I've never watched Dawn of the Dead all the way through the new one. I do know the credit sequence with Down with the Sickness in it.
Yes.
And
yes.
then what happens? But that's also a great example of a remake done right. But you know what? Let's leave a message for all of our viewers out there. Don't watch Psycho from Gus Van Sant.
I can endorse that.
Have you experienced it, Vinny?
I have, and you know what? I like Gus Van Sant's movies. Well, most of them anyway. But I mean, and it's funny because he did that the year after Good Will Hunting.
So strange.
So it was quite a turn in terms of filmmaking, but he got the urge to do a shot-for-shot remake out of the way, and let's just hope nothing like that ever happens again with him or with anyone else.
Yes, please don't make shot-for-shot remakes of Hitchcock films, because what's the point? Really? But we're gonna leave that on our note here. But Vinny, thank you so much for coming on to Wasteland Talks and talking about remakes.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Would you like to shamelessly plug anything before we wrap up?
You can follow me on Twitter at Vinnie Abbatecola, and I have a movie review website, cinemaconversations.blogspot.com.
And you should check out Vinny's new review of Licorice Pizza, because I just saw that on Twitter. But thank you, Vinny, and thank all of you out there for tuning in and always supporting your Wasteland reviewer.